Good morning, Cowboys Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Writer's Block podcast. I am your host, David Howman, joined by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Icebreaker, Brandon Clements, here to talk all things Cowboys. Chris Holland couldn't make it for this one, but we've got Brandon Clements back again. We missed you last week. Brandon, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you excited and ready for the holiday season to kick in?
Oh yeah, it's been a weird stretch the last few weeks. I've missed being on, and I'm glad to be back in the saddle this week. Yeah, with the holidays, man, I'm not gonna lie. It's I'm one of those guys, last minute. So I'll probably get my Christmas shopping done this weekend, coming
So
up.
you're
So
like
I'm usually
Arnold Schwarzenegger in Jingle All the Way,
yeah. Oh
waiting to
yeah.
get the Turbo Man doll. Have you seen
Oh
that
yeah. I'm
movie?
just Yeah. Oh yeah. I seen it.
Okay,
I grew up on Arnold Schwarzenegger movies,
there
man.
we
So
go.
that was a change for me from like Terminator to that. So, but yeah, no, I'm very last minute. I just that's how I am. My wife hates it, but maybe I'll get on Amazon ahead of time and maybe get a few things this week. So my wife is not she's not pleased with me when it comes to this stuff. But at the end of the day, I always make it work, even if it's very very last minute. Yeah, and in regards to everything else, I mean, Syracuse football's been rolling, so I've been I know we're in bowl season. It's nice that the Syracuse Orange will be playing a bowl game around New Year's, which they usually don't do because it's just how it's been around here for a long time. So, I'm looking forward to that. Maybe Kyle McCord is back in 2025. Got an Alabama transfer coming in, so I'm very happy for that. And of course, we're here to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. And I was very pleased. I get it; it was the Panthers, but there's a lot of great things we're going to talk about this week, and I can't wait to break it down further because it was a very positive week for America's team.
Yeah, and it's funny hearing you talk about Syracuse and being in a bowl game. Me over here as an Arizona State guy, I'm just like, oh yeah, they still do bowl games. I thought
Yeah.
I thought it was just college football playoff. I didn't realize there were other things beyond that. Of course, Arizona State, fun fact, has never not been in the 12-team playoff. So 100% make rate.
Pretty good.
We're ready for either Clemson or Texas.
Hey,
Whoever it
by the
is,
way,
whoever it
and I
is, we
know,
coming.
and I know, I don't not to get too far on a tangent, but the schools that we love, you're an Arizona State guy, I'm a Cuse guy. Both schools represented in the Heisman top 10 this year. So shout out to our programs.
Yeah, that is true. Cam Scatterbo coming in fifth. Didn't get an invite to the Heisman presentation show in New York or whatever. I thought that was kind of a bit of a joke, but as long as Cam Scatterbo ends up on the Dallas Cowboys next year, bowling people over, running for these Cowboys, that would be a lot of fun. But of course, we got plenty of time before we really get into draft season.
Oh, 100%.
And it'll be a great time. But right now, we are in the holiday season. Before we dive into all things Cowboys, Brandon, is Christmas your favorite holiday? What is your favorite holiday? What are some of your traditions around this time of year?
Oh gosh, when my wife listens to this back, she's gonna be like, "Yeah, okay." She calls me a Grinch sometimes, but
Okay.
I'll be honest with you, I do enjoy the holidays, especially being a dad. Like I got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, so being a father has changed kind of my Christmas perspective because I used to always work on around the holidays because sports never ended and I was in sports radio for a long time, so like we always had things going on. So like I was just making more money at that point. But I mean, holiday traditions, usually, being married, you're going to your family, like your immediate family, and then you're going to your in-laws. So we just every year it's a juggling act. We have other parts of the family. We kind of try to mingle. We try to the holiday season. I do have something coming up with cousins, which it'll be nice because we haven't done anything like this with that side of the family in a long time. So it'll be fun. We're doing that, this weekend. So yeah, I mean, we don't have any like real traditions, but we do have this thing. I guess you can call it a tradition. I guess I'll take that back. We do have this thing here in Syracuse called Lights on the Lake. And essentially, it's right by, not like 15, 20 minutes from my house. And it's essentially like almost like a parade of lights. You just drive around in your car. It's just beautiful lights around the lake. My kids love it. My wife loves it. My wife is the the big Christmas girl. She wants to keep Christmas stuff up all year. That's how she rolls. I'm the guy that's like, can we put the Christmas tree up on Christmas Eve? Obviously, that's not happening.
Okay, yeah.
We agreed on Black Friday, so we
Very
we
different
agreed.
ends of the spectrum there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not. Here's the thing, like, it is true. My wife will, she'll attest to this. Before kids, definitely, I just worked so much, so I wasn't. I guess you'd call me a Grinch, but now that I got my little girls, I just love watching them open up all the gifts from Santa, and that's what it's all about. It's all about giving, spending time with family, and of course, the NFL is going to throw us some Christmas gifts for some games as well. So you can't forget that either.
Yeah, we've got a few Christmas games now this year. I think last year was the first year that they did football on Christmas Day, which I have a bone to pick with, because the tradition was always like, we wake up, at least for me, my tradition was you wake up Christmas morning, me and my immediate family, we all open our presents, and then we get dressed up, we drive up north to our extended family, have a big fancy dinner with them. All of us open our presents, and then myself and a couple of my cousins would like try to convince people to turn on the NBA games, because that's all it was on to watch. Was there's NBA on Christmas, and you gotta convince them to turn that on. And now it's it's NFL. Like, it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to go watch LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo. We were both talking before the show. Neither of us really stay active with NBA these days. So I don't know all the names, all the big names out there.
I'm all about the Knicks for me. I follow my Knicks, and I know enough to get myself in trouble and all that. So I've always tried to watch those Knicks games on Christmas. My dad's a Celtics fan. Like, that's like, so it's Knicks Celtics. It's not Celtics Lakers, but Knicks Celtics. It's still New York, Boston. My dad grew up in that, the Havlicek, Larry Bird. So, like, it's a lot of talking smack. So, we love watching those games on Christmas.
Yeah, but it's not the same with Christmas Day football. So I don't know. I do love football anytime I can get it, though. But
yeah, me too.
I'm glad the Cowboys aren't playing on Christmas Day, because it wouldn't feel right. But
they don't need to be on every holiday. I mean, they already take Thanksgiving. We don't need.
We've already got Thanksgiving every single year.
Yeah, I'm good with Thanksgiving. We don't need to do Christmas.
Yeah.
We can do it like the day before, day after, however it falls, and that's.
They got a good thing going. So
yeah, I agree.
So that's both of us being a Grinch for just a little bit. I think Christmas a little bit more than you. I will say I've liked it less the older I've gotten, because now I just like, everybody says, oh, the older you get, then you start just getting like socks and underwear gifts. Now I've gotten to the point where I look forward to that, because I'm like, great, now I don't have to buy it myself. And then when I think about it, I'm like, that's kind of sad that that's how old I am now. Get excited.
It's a thing, dude. It's a thing. As you get older, that's what you look for.
Yeah. But so that's where I'm at. But speaking of the Cowboys, though, not playing on Christmas, but they did just play a heck of a game against the Carolina Panthers, as Brandon alluded to. They came away with a 30-14 final score. Honestly, 30-14 makes it sound closer than it was. I mean, this was a domination. And you said, I mean, it's just the Panthers. I'm very much of the opinion that this game meant something. Like, obviously, doesn't really mean much for the playoffs as of right now. The Cowboys have a 0.6% chance of making the playoffs. They can only do it as the 7th seed. They have been eliminated from the 1st through 6th seed. So they have to do it as, actually, I think, no, the Eagles clinched the division, so they can only do it as the 7th seed. So this didn't really do much for their playoff odds, aside from if they had lost this game with Washington beating New Orleans, they would have been eliminated if they had lost to the Panthers. But in terms of like the overall vibes, this game I think was really important, because the Panthers only have 3 wins, but the Panthers have been a legitimately good team lately. I mean, they came into this game on a 3-game losing streak, but the teams they lost to the Chiefs on a last-second field goal. They lost to the Buccaneers on a field goal in overtime, and they lost by 6 to the Eagles the week before. And that was a game where the Panthers were driving in the final 2 minutes, if they'd gone down, I mean, they were in field goal range, but they were down 6, so they had to go for it on 4th down, and they came up short. But they were moving the ball. They had the Eagles genuinely worried about how that game was going to go. And those 3 games, I mean, they lost to 3 teams that are first in their division right now by a total combined score of 12 points. Cowboys beat them by 16. And they should have beat them by more. If you watch the game, like they could have beat them by a lot more. And Bryce Young has been playing really well. Mike Zimmer had Bryce Young's head spinning in this game. I mean, he had several turnovers, took a ton of sacks. He hasn't been doing that in the last few weeks. Are you as pumped about this game as I was? Because I was watching this and I was like, hey, this is like we got some momentum going with this team. The Mike McCarthy, the Mike Zimmer, we'll get into all that stuff. But like those 2 guys, these players are playing for those coaches.
No, they are. I mean, there's no argument there. Like, yeah, obviously I've said on previous episodes where I stand on the Mike McCarthy thing. And I think since I've been on, some guy named Bill Belichick went back to college. So he's back at UNC. So that was one of the choices that I would have liked to see Dallas go for. But you know what? This is you're gonna look at me sideways when I say this, but I might not be as close-minded about maybe giving him a 1 year, maybe like not an extension, but like let's get like a 2-year deal in or something with with an option out after 1, something like that. I don't know how the contract would work, but the point is, I'm not as dead set against Mike McCarthy leaving as as I was. I mean, that's and I know that's music to your ears because I know you're a Mike McCarthy guy.
The idea of out after 1 year still like makes my skin crawl, but I'll take it. This is character growth for you.
Well, yeah, dude. I'll be honest with you. It tastes like vinegar, because here's the thing. It's like you said it just a moment ago. They're playing hard for him. Like the players are playing very hard for McCarthy. Like obviously Micah wants him back. Dak wants him back. Jerry might say
Micah wants him back just a couple weeks after saying Mike McCarthy can go wherever he wants. Like it sounded very much like he did not care about Mike McCarthy.
Here's the thing, though. I think with Micah Parsons, you got to take some of those things with a grain of salt because I think Micah and this is we do a podcast, so we're going to have some hot takes and some things that maybe people aren't going to agree with it. It is what it is. Micah's got his own podcast, which is doing really well, and he says some things sometimes that you kind of like. Really, dude? Why would you say that? But it's, it's Micah. I don't think he means it sometimes in the way it comes out. Micah, I think Micah and Mike, I think Coach McCarthy, I think they have a really good relationship. And honestly, to me, it's a package deal. If McCarthy's back next year, Zim's back as well. Like Zim has done a great job with his defense. We've gone through all the injuries. We've talked about it. Mike has been out at one point. We haven't seen Tank in forever. Overshown's probably going to be out until 2026. At this point, wouldn't rush him back. I mean, some people are saying maybe end of the year next year. I don't even want to think about that. I want Overshown to get as healthy as possible, and let's just put it on the back burner until 26. But the point is, Mike Zimmer has got this defense playing well. And I don't know if you caught it on the broadcast this past week, but they were speaking very highly of Dallas Cowboys rookie Maris Leafau, where he could be wearing the green dot.
He had a game.
And here's the thing. He's not only had a game, but he's been playing, like, I hate saying this, but with Overshown's injury, he's had to come back in and play more than he was at points because obviously Overshown is a freak of nature. But since Overshown's injury, which just happened recently, Maris has really taken a step forward, and they've even been saying like the coaching staff would put a green dot on him any day of the week. So if Kendricks isn't back, then you could use Leafau as the green dot next year because Leafau is so smart. He's very aggressive, and he's been playing some good football. So it's to me there's so many good things to look forward to. And I'm not as excited as you are about the Panthers. It's still the Panthers. They're still not. They haven't. If they were a good football team, they'd win those games or at least win some of those games. Let's be honest. Bad teams lose those type of games, and they're a bad team. That's how I look at it. But I will say, Bryce Young coming into this game was actually playing better ball than C.J. Stroud. During this stretch that you mentioned. So it was a better Bryce Young. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong on this, but I thought I heard on the broadcast that the Panthers might have been favored. Is that a thing?
2.5
did I hear
points.
that?
Yeah. It was the first time in, I think, 32 games that the Panthers had been favored in a game. Granted, it was 2.5 points at home against a team with a backup quarterback. Those who are, hip with the gambling lingo, that on average, a home field advantage is worth about 3 points in the betting market.
Yes.
So essentially that's saying if that game was played on a neutral field, Vegas would have given the Cowboys a 0.5 point favorite, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not like they were looking at this game and going, oh yeah, Panthers are going to win, like they're going to crush it. But yeah, they were favored. And I think it's easy to see why, because yeah, they lost those games to the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, and the Eagles, but they made it. I mean, the Chiefs and the Eagles are two of the very best teams in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
The Buccaneers they're probably going to the playoffs. They're currently in first in their division. I wouldn't necessarily say they're like one of the best teams, but they're definitely a good team.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, they're a good team.
And I mean, you're winning you're losing within a score to all three of those very, very good teams. For the Cowboys to blow them out with Cooper Rush, by the way, the offensive line. I mean, so much of this conversation is about like, oh, well, they got a backup quarterback, Cooper Rush, blah, blah, blah. But like Zach Martin's done for the year. Both Tyler Guyton and Tyler Smith have missed time. Cooper Beebe just missed his first game with a concussion. So you've got Brock Hoffman starting at center. You've got TJ Bass, your guy, starting at right guard. At one point, Bass left the game. Like Bass got hurt, and Chuma Edoga came. He was playing left tackle. They moved him to right guard. They brought Tyler Guyton back in at left tackle. Like there's been so many changes on the offensive line just in the last few weeks, and they're running the ball like crazy. Cooper Rush is like actually kind of looking good when he doesn't fumble the ball without any contact. CeeDee Lamb's getting his numbers. I mean, the way that they're doing this, they've won 3 of their last 4. They should have beat the Bengals. I mean, this is a team that's very much the momentum is moving forward for them. And obviously I've been on this all year, and obviously completely correct in my call that Mike McCarthy should be brought back, as we are seeing now. But really, though, I mean, you look at this. I mean, a year ago was McCarthy's first year calling plays in Dallas, and I don't think that anybody would say that he did a bad job. Like there are some things that you can nitpick here and there, but Dak Prescott had the best year of his career. He was a runner-up for MVP. They won 12 games again. I mean, the offense was very, very good. We know that things can be very good with him calling the plays. Things didn't always look great this year before Dak went down. There were a few factors there. The Brandon Cooks injury didn't help. 2 rookies starting on the offensive line didn't help. CeeDee Lamb missing all of training camp didn't help. But now things are coming back into form. Like they're getting a little bit of their rhythm back. They're getting some mojo back. Rico Dowdle now 3 straight weeks, 100+ rushing yards. And now, by the way, he needs, I think it was 120 rushing yards to hit 1,000 for the year. Like I remember, I'm gonna have to go and find the actual video, but we were talking in the preseason and saying Cowboys aren't going to have a 1,000-yard rusher this year, and we all kind of agreed because it looked like they were going to have a running back by committee, and you're probably not going to have a 1,000-yard rusher with a running back by committee. Now Dowdle is like probably a lock for a 1,000-yard rushing season. CeeDee Lamb just hit 1,000-yard receiving. He's the second receiver in franchise history next to Michael Irvin to have 4 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Almost made it 5. He came very close in his rookie year, which was another year that he played most of the season without Dak Prescott. I mean, I don't want to say 2 best players because like Dowdle wasn't really like a top guy until recently, but Mike McCarthy's getting his best players the ball. He's getting them action. He's getting the ball out of Cooper Rush's hand for the most part in a way that helps them move the offense. He's figured this thing out. It took a little bit of time, but he's figured it out. I mean, again, you can point to things with the offense that you maybe don't like, but I mean, it sometimes I see people talk about this offense and the way he calls plays as if he's like, as if we're running some offense, some archaic offense from the 80s. And I'm just like, we're throwing the ball on first down at one of the like early down passing rate is right up there at the top of the league. They've generally had more motion. Everybody wants to talk about motion. It's gone up a little bit as the season's gone on. A lot of the personnel issues has contributed to that to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of things that they do well that really do work for this offense. And could it be better? Yes. There's only one team in the NFL has Kyle Shanahan calling plays. Only one team in the NFL has Andy Reid calling plays. But you look at this offense and what they're doing with so many injuries, so many guys missing. I mean, I'm not upset at this point. I'm not upset with what I've been seeing from the coaching staff, from Mike McCarthy, from the game plan they're putting out offensively. We're getting Rico Dowdle going. We're getting CeeDee Lamb going. I mean, Jalen Brooks had an incredible touchdown catch. Since Chris isn't here to hype up his guy, by the way, for those who don't know, Chris was at the game. So happy for him that he got to be in the stands watching his Cowboys not only win, but Jalen Brooks making an insane touchdown grab, who Brandon Clements once said doesn't even belong on the field. He's such a bum that he should be inactive. And then he goes and he does that in front of Chris Halling.
Hey, well, I mean, hey, blind squirrels find nuts once in a while. I mean, that's just how it is. I'll still stand on the Ryan Flournoy train. It hasn't worked out yet so far, but hey, we're going to be doing this next year, so we'll see where Ryan Flournoy is next year. But no, kudos to Jalen Brooks. Like, I'm happy for him. It was a scramble drill. He went to the back of the end zone, back corner. Cooper threw a dot. It was a tough throw, a good throw, and Brooks came down with it. So kudos to him. But I got to step back with Rico. I mean, Rico is averaging 5 yards a carry on the year. And, if you put that amongst the guys that are normally, like the workhorses, like the Saquons, the Derrick Henrys, he's up there with those guys on an average basis right now per carry. There are some stats are a little inflated because this guy might have only say 10, 12, 15 touches a year. But for the amount of volume that he has, he's up there with those guys. I'm not saying he's Saquon. I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry, so let's not get that twisted. But Rico Dowdle, 5 yards a carry throughout the entire season, 880 yards, on the year. And he's done it on honestly, 13, 14 attempts a game. So it's not like he wasn't getting a full workload until recently. So those numbers have kind of come up, in recent weeks because like we just saw this past week, 25 carries, 149 yards, and it was a 6 yards per carry average. I get it's the Panthers, but you already alluded to it. He's done it 3 straight games, 100 yards plus. Like, Rico's on a roll, and I'm just going to say it this way. Cowboys fans, we're not going to have him next year because he's playing somewhere else. I just, Rico is hold on. Let me finish real quick. Let me finish this real quick. The reason why I say that is I think he's going to play. I think he plays elsewhere because I don't think the Cowboys are going to pay him what I think his market value will be going into next year. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to have Rico back next year. I hope I'm wrong. But don't be surprised that the market value is at a price point where you know how the Joneses are. The Joneses don't always like to pay players. We get that. They go to the bargain bin. They go to the local thrift store, so to speak. That's how they roll. So I'm hoping that's not the case. But Rico's recent games, if he keeps this up, he might be playing elsewhere with a bigger contract, which he has rightfully deserved because he hasn't by NFL standards, he hasn't made a lot of money in the league.
So all that being said, where did they draft Rico Dowdle?
They didn't. Undrafted.
You can say that again.
South Carolina.
Yes.
But money talks, dude.
Where did
money
they
talks.
draft their last 1,000-yard rusher? 4th round, Tony Pollard, who, by the way, is having a heck of a year in Tennessee.
Well, I mean, who's having a heck of a year in Tennessee? I mean, he fumbled one this past week too, but Tony. I feel bad for Tony. He's got to play with Will Levis. I mean, Mayo Man's not playing well. So,
but Tony Pollard, 4th round draft pick. Rico Dowdle, undrafted. those are your last 2,000-yard rushers. I mean, we spent so much time, not necessarily this show specifically, although we did spend some time talking about it, but Cowboys Nation in general, oh, we got to draft a running back high. The fact that we didn't draft a running back, horrible. Like, none of these guys are going to be 1,000-yard rushers. Rico could do it. Granted, he hasn't actually done it yet, but we got 3 games left to play. Odds seem good he's probably going to do it.
I think so.
Either way, we got plenty of crow to eat on Rico Dowdle. And now all the people saying, like, oh, we should draft Ashton Jeanty in the first round. Don't get me wrong. Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State, phenomenal runner.
We know who you are.
This is a stacked running back class. We already talked about Cam Scatterbo. He's probably going to be a day 2 draft pick at this point. Could potentially fall to day 3 just because of the people will get worried about his sample size, how many carries he's had in his career, tread on the tire. But you've got Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech. You've got Jaden Ott out of California. There's Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. There's other guys, plenty of guys. This is a loaded running back class. And there's no reason, just as there is every year, there's no reason to, spend quality draft capital or like actual capital in free agency dollars on a running back, especially when you're already paying Dak Prescott, you're already paying CeeDee Lamb, you got to pay Micah Parsons. Hopefully they're paying Oso Odigizua. He had another great game against Carolina. You're going to have to pay Deron Bland soon. You're going to have to pay Jake Ferguson soon.
Can't pay them all.
Tyler Smith's coming up soon. He's gonna cost a pretty penny. I'm sure there's other guys that I'm missing, but you got a lot of contracts coming up, and you got a lot of guys you got to pay. And the reality is you're not going to be able to pay all of them. Rico Dowdle, I agree. They'll probably let him walk. I would not be surprised if Dowdle kind of tests the market and then comes back on a mid-market deal with the Cowboys just because he knows the system. And he and Mike McCarthy are really close. I know McCarthy has talked him up even before this year, has talked him up a lot and loves the guy. So, but also at the same time, if Dowdle gets a nice contract somewhere else, Cowboys aren't going to match it.
And good for him. Good for him to get paid.
Right. I would be so happy. So happy if he takes it.
Me too.
And the Cowboys would also be smart not to match it because they showed with Tony Pollard, they showed with Rico Dowdle, they showed with Darren McFadden back in, 2015? Like, you can have productive running backs without breaking the bank. So
here's what I'll tell you. You know who I want? Yes, obviously Ashton Jeanty is like the belle of the ball. I get that. But you know who I'd take a little bit later on in the draft? Nicholas Singleton from Penn State. He's a beast. He's a hell of a football player. I think that's a guy you can get a little bit later that I think will be a very productive NFL player. He's got the right combo of size, speed. He's just a productive player. Watch out for him. I mean, you mentioned Henderson and whatnot. There's a kid at Tennessee. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. He's a little bit leaner, but he's a good player.
Is it Jeremiah Love, I think?
I can't. Honestly, I'm drawing a blank. All I see is
draft season hasn't officially started yet. I know a lot of Cowboys fans are working the mock draft machines these days, but it hasn't officially started.
Dylan Sampson. That's who it is.
Okay.
Dylan Sampson.
I don't know all the names yet, but point being, there's going to be a lot of running backs in the draft. You don't need to take one day one. You don't need to pay Saquon money in free agency. Granted, Saquon's been really good for the Eagles, but you look at their rushing numbers the last few years without him too. It's not like they were just a horrible rushing team before. I don't think that's necessarily – I don't think that the Eagles would be – maybe they lose 1 or 2 more games than they have this year without Saquon, but is that really a move that took them to where they are right now? Or they have an incredible offensive line. They've always had an incredible offensive line. Most running backs are going to put up numbers behind that. And the hope is the Cowboys offensive line can be like that too. Obviously, Zach Martin may not be there next year. There's going to be questions about who's playing where. Tyler Guyton doesn't seem to have a lot of confidence from the coaching staff right now, how all of that shakes out. These are all questions they'll answer in the offseason. But the point being, they've found a formula that works right now. Rico Dowdle's been playing well. But even more so, the formula that's been working even better is the defense. And we touched on this already a little bit, but Mike Zimmer, wow. I tweeted during the game. I said something to the effect of probably the most compelling argument to keep Mike McCarthy is solely for the fact of keeping Mike Zimmer around, because this defense is balling out right now. And to that same point, on Tuesday, Jerry Jones, during a radio appearance, he said that he views them essentially as a package deal, like Mike McCarthy and Mike Zimmer. Like if you're keeping one, you're keeping the other, kind of thing. And he said that, you know, he then talked both of them up. And I want to give a shout out to one of the major mainstays of Cowboys Twitter, who left Twitter before this past season began, which I think is the reason that the Cowboys ended up doing as poorly as they did. But we all know him, Cowboys Stats and Graphics on Twitter. He did a breakdown of Mike Zimmer's defense and how they've historically performed over the years at each of his coaching stops back when Zimmer was first hired. And what he said at the time was essentially, in the first year, there's a steep learning curve. But by the end of year one for Mike Zimmer, at all of his different stops as defensive coordinator, or in the case of being the Vikings head coach, he also was the defensive play caller. By the end of that first year, they start playing at a playoff caliber level. Going into the second year, they're playing at top 5 level. Beyond that, they're like consistently one of the top in the NFL in defensive production. And that's what we're seeing to a T right now with the Cowboys. I mean, we know early on things did not look good. They also didn't have Micah Parsons for a good period of that. They haven't had DeMarcus Lawrence hardly all year. We've gotten one game of the 3 starting corners playing together. It was 2 weeks ago now. And we had it, and then just like that, Trayvon Diggs out for the year and could potentially miss some of the next year as well. The timeline for that is still uncertain. But even with all of those changes, even with DeMarvion Overshown and his injury, they're still playing really well. Over the last 5-6 games since Micah Parsons came back, they're top 10 right now in EPA per play. They're actually 3rd in EPA per dropback, meaning just against the pass. And Mike Zimmer is, the pressure looks that he's coming up with Micah Parsons, the way that he moves him around, the double mug on those 3rd down packages, the coverage guys are getting it. They understand the scheme a little bit better. This defense is flying. And I look at this and I'm just like, I want Mike Zimmer back, probably more than I want Mike McCarthy back, just because this is such a good defense when the guys are bought in and when they're all on the same page like they are. And you have a guy like Micah Parsons, he just unlocks everything for you in a way that I don't even think, all due respect to Dan Quinn, because he had some really good defenses, I don't think that he really tapped into the potential that you can do with Micah Parsons the way that Zimmer has so far.
Well, here's the other thing too, and it's, you know, they alluded to it on the broadcast, you know, Greg Olson and then the Fox crew there, you know, not only him, but I got to shout out, I believe Bill Belichick also brought it up as well recently on he's been doing stuff with Peyton Manning, and he compared it, and Bill Belichick would know because you know, he's coached around the league a little bit, and he coached.
He knows a thing or two.
Yeah, he knows a thing or two, and he also
and now he even knows a thing or two about recruiting.
Yeah, yeah. He knows a thing or two about everything when it comes to football. But he coached a guy. We all, you know, people are comparing Micah to, and that's Lawrence Taylor, LT. And what Bill Belichick and Olsen both said, you know, at different points in different ways, but I picked up what they both were putting down, is Belichick would just be like, LT, you could go wherever you want, essentially. Whatever you think is going to be the, you know, what's going to work for you. If you want to set up on the inside, go on the inside. You want to go on the left side, go on the left side. You want to go on the right side, go on the right side. And guess what? Micah Parsons is doing the same thing, and Mike Zimmer is letting him do what Micah Parsons wants to do, which is what Bill Belichick was letting LT do. So it's like you got these coaches that obviously the great defensive minds. They see that they got a you know, all decade, you know, a guy who, you know, is a once in a generation type talent, which is LT, and then obviously Micah Parsons today. And you're like, find the matchup, go wherever you want. I trust you. And guess what? It's working. And you mentioned that, the double mug. I'll be honest with you. I like what they do with these different alignments because sometimes they're sending 6. Sometimes those 2 linebackers are bailing, so they're going in coverage. And, you get the occasional, one will go, one won't. Like Mike Zimmer's been mixing it up where he's been confusing guys, like you mentioned, Bryce Young this past week. it's working, and like I said, I'll eat a little crow. Bring the mics back next year. At least for 1 year. Let's see what we can do with essentially a full deck minus DeMarvin Overshown, because I'm not expecting him to play next year.
Right.
Let's see what we can do with a full deck, and you know what? And then if it doesn't work out with a full deck, then then maybe move on. But I think because of how hard they've been playing, on defense, offense, everywhere, I think we keep this staff intact for at least another year. Get the guys back that we can get back, and then we'll see what happens from there.
We started this show with you saying you're a bit of a Grinch, and here it is, your heart growing 2 times larger. How beautiful is this moment? You've come around on Mike McCarthy, not all the way. You're not going to give him the 5-year contract that he probably will get, because hey, the reality is, it's rare enough that a coach goes into their final year of their contract that when it happens, we all talk about it incessantly all off season.
Yeah.
So to your point, I don't think McCarthy's coming back for a 1 or a 2-year contract. It's probably a 5-year contract, and then if things go bad, they'll fire him. Otherwise, we're going to that 5th year of contract, and maybe he's getting an extension. Maybe he's not. We'll do this whole thing over again.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not saying I don't like Mike Vrabel, for example, or the Ben Johnsons of the world, but like, to me, what Mike McCarthy has done, and I've come around on that. I'll admit that. I think Mike McCarthy is probably the best you compare Mike McCarthy to. Let's be honest, Ben Johnson's never been a head coach. We don't know what he can be. He's a hell of an offense coordinator, offensive mind. Sure. Vrabel's pretty good, but I'm like, it didn't work out in Tennessee. So I'm like, Mike McCarthy's already here. He's got the guys. He's got the staff here. Zimmer's here. The players love him, and they're playing hard for him, even though the talent level on this team isn't where it has been the last few years, where they've been winning 12 games.
Yeah.
But they're still fighting. They're making games competitive. They're still in the playoff hunt, albeit a smidge, but they're still there.
Telling me there's a chance.
You're telling me there's a chance, 100%, like not really 100%, but like it's like a 1 in a million shot. But you know what? At the end of the day, I just don't think what's out there in the coaching market, the coaching space right now. I think we ride it out, at least short term. Maybe you're probably right. They're probably gonna, Mike's gonna say 4 or 5 years, on a contract. Let's see what happens after year 1 or year 2, and in that new deal, and then maybe he gets the rear end boot, and that's it. But yeah. I'm not opposed to it.
The point that you're making is also one that Greg Olson made during the game as well, saying like I know everybody wants to get rid of Mike McCarthy, but you have to ask the question, who replaces him, and are they actually an upgrade? And maybe there's an upgrade out there, it could be, but there's no sure thing of an upgrade. Even before Bill Belichick went to North Carolina, which, by the way, I'm excited for Syracuse and UNC in that one. But
thank you. Yeah.
Even before he went there, looking at Bill Belichick, he's 72 years old. He hasn't won a playoff game since the 2018 season. Granted, he won the Super Bowl that year, but since Tom Brady left the Patriots, hasn't exactly had the best record. And then Mike Vrabel, like you said, one thing that's really interesting to me is, they won a lot of games. Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator. He leaves to take the Falcons head coaching job. And then the next 2 years, they have a losing record both years. Offense gets even worse. Derrick Henry isn't quite the same. Vrabel gets fired. For some reason, nobody talks about, Arthur Smith carried Mike Vrabel. And I'm not necessarily saying that's the case. I don't know enough about the Titans during that time to make any sort of judgment on what actually went wrong there. But I know he tailed off. He had success, and then he tailed off. And the offense was never really that good. And I know with Ben Johnson, like you said, we don't know. We know that he's
a wild card.
We know that he's been, I would probably say, top 3 offensive play caller the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But also, that's all he has experience-wise as a play caller. And you also look at those rosters. The Lions have probably the best offensive line in the NFL. They have, great running backs, great receivers. They have a brilliant tight end in Sam Laporta, who somehow fell to the second round. Anybody with a brain could have seen he's a first-round talent.
Well, let's be honest. It's been a down year.
And you've got a head coach in Dan Campbell who is he's a grade A motivator and builder. And I think Ben Johnson probably will be a good coach, but there's a lot of uncertainty there. There's a lot of newness. Being a head coach is very different from being an offensive coordinator. And I also don't think that he's going to consider the Cowboys because he's been very selective. He turned down the Commanders' job last year, which now kind of looks like a blessing for the Commanders because Dan Quinn's done a pretty good job there. But now there's these reports that like whoever he goes, he wants the owner to be making an admission of what has gone wrong, what their mistakes were. And I heard that, and I was like, well, there goes the Cowboys. Jerry Jones ain't saying that. He's not going to do that. So much so that now Jerry is even saying, yeah, I made a good decision. Let's bring Mike McCarthy back. Like the man does not admit any mistake, whether he makes it or not. So I don't think that Ben Johnson is an option. Mike Vrabel, I don't think he's necessarily a bad coach, but I don't think that he fixes any of the problems that currently exist under the Mike McCarthy era. And if there's a coach out there that is a real upgrade, it's not painfully obvious right now, to me at least. Like I'm sure there's a diamond in the rough somewhere there. Like nobody knew how good Matt LaFleur was going to be when the Packers hired him. He was kind of an out of left field hire. Sean McVay has been great with the Rams. Like he was not. I'm pretty sure that was the only team that interviewed him when they actually hired him to the Rams. He was not necessarily like the hot name on the market. So, you know, the situation right now is basically either bring back Mike McCarthy or try to hire somebody that nobody else sees as like the next great coach right now.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it's you know, like you said, there could be a guy that's out of left field that turns out to be, you know, the next great coach that we've seen. Maybe he's the next, you know, Shanahan, so to speak. But I think with the marketplace the way it is, I think another name that I would say it would be a safer choice if they were to go in a different direction is Brian Flores. I think that's a name that, you know, obviously look what he's done with the Vikings. I mean, he's done a hell of a job. I think he's been a hell of a coach since he's, you know, ever since he stepped into the coaching ranks. He's been a well-respected you know, mind in the game. So I don't. And here's the thing. Is it an upgrade? I think with anything, you're kind of like even in a sense, you know. So like at this point, go with what you already have. The players know the system. Might as well just roll with it for now.
They not only do they know the system, but they love the coach. Like to your point, they're playing hard for him.
Yeah.
They're publicly vouching for him. And I like your pull of Brian Flores too. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago now at Blogging the Boys saying if they do make a move, which again I have remained firm all year saying they should not move on from Mike McCarthy.
They probably won't now.
But if they do, the coach that I want, and keep in mind the last time the Cowboys had a coaching vacancy and they were actually hiring, the guy that I vouched for, the guy that I pulled for was Dan Campbell, who turned out to be pretty darn good in Detroit.
Yeah, pretty good.
Detroit of all places. So, you know, do with that information what you will. But the one that I would want, if there is a vacancy, is Brian Flores. Because to your point, I mean, his defense is phenomenal. I mean, the Vikings defense is the best in the league, has been all year, and they're doing it without star players. I mean, their best players right now, like in terms of like name recognition, are Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Byron Murphy. Like maybe Dallas Turner because he's a rookie and he was a first-round draft pick. But I mean, it's and all due respect to those players, like they're all very good players and they're playing like out of their minds right now. But he doesn't have star players, and he's still able. He has this defense playing together as a unit. There's a least penalized defense in the NFL, by the way, for all those people who really want a disciplined coach. Brian Flores is your guy. And I think his time with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota means that, and I wrote about this in the article too, he's wherever he goes as a head coach, because he's probably getting a head coaching job after this year. He's going to be at the top of a lot of lists. He's probably bringing someone with him as his offensive coordinator who comes from that Kevin O'Connell, Kyle Shanahan offensive tree. And my thought process is if we are moving on from Mike McCarthy and scrapping the Texas Coast offense, the only way that you like really truly get better than that is by doing what the rest of the league is doing and taking a branch off of the Kyle Shanahan tree, running that offense. And so I'm like, I really like the duo we have of the Mike McCarthy offense and the Mike Zimmer defense. And so I'm like, if you're scrapping that, at least give me a Brian Flores defense with a Shanahan style offense. Because that, again, like you said, I think that's probably about even. But again, I don't think it's an upgrade. So you continuity, the players love him. The players are fighting hard for him. They know the scheme. They're thriving in the scheme right now. Like, take a year, get healthy, maybe just like a little bit more effort from the front office this offseason. Do one of those like Brandon Cook, Stephon Gilmore trades instead of the Jonathan Mingo trade, the Andrew Booth trade. Nothing against those guys in particular. They both have, come in and done their part, and they've worked hard, and they've been grinding away for the Cowboys, but that's not what's winning you championships.
No, it's not.
So, yeah, I mean, we're both in agreement that you should stick with the continuity if there's, as they say, nothing broke. I mean, you're not going to do a whole lot better. And as we transition into looking around the NFL from this past week, there's some examples out there of some other coaches of, hey, if you don't get the right head coaching hire, things could get really, really bad.
That's true.
And, for me, of course, the first thing that I pivot to is the good old Raiders, who there's a lot of buzz now that Antonio Pierce might get the boot after just one full year as the head coach. And there's all this talk about like, yeah, it just doesn't feel as good as it did last year. And I'm like, yeah, that's why like every interim coach comes in and like, you always get that first game bump because you fire a coach and they're like, oh, thank God, like Josh McDaniels is gone. Antonio Pierce comes in and has energy. He wins just by the sake of not being Josh McDaniels, and players are like, I'll play hard for this guy. But then when like he's still your boss a year later, you're just like, this guy doesn't really know what he's doing. I mean, nobody else interviewed him for head coach, and there's a reason. So I'm obviously biased, but tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the Vegas Raiders have been a dumpster fire. I think that's just putting it lightly. I mean, they might as well just trade Max Crosby, let him go play somewhere they can win some legitimate football games. Honestly, at this point, I mean, he's like their best player, and they're not.
Like
I don't think they
Mack
will.
2.0.
What's that?
It's like Khalil Mack 2.0. Like you've got a foundational pass rusher, and the rest of the team sucks.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like, and I know one of your other favorites. I know you're not the biggest. You're the biggest Sean Payton guy, but I got to give it to Sean Payton. Sean Payton and Vance Joseph, they've been quite the tandem down in Denver. So what are they? I think they got 9 wins on the year. So good for them.
They got 9 wins on the year. But let's be honest. I'm glad you mentioned Vance Joseph because, I mean, there have been times that offense has looked good. I will give it to Sean Payton. I will give it to Bo Nix.
Yes.
But let's be honest. If that defense doesn't play the way it has under Vance Joseph, they're not winning 9 games. I mean, that defense is on another level.
You think Vance? You think Vance might get a look at head coaching circle this year?
He might get a look. I don't know.
I don't know if he gets hired, but
he's been a head coach before. He's very well liked by players. I don't know. I would at least interview him. But
I mean, the reason I say that is I think Vance Joseph, maybe not in this cycle, but maybe in maybe a year down the line, if things are really good with the Broncos and they take another step forward and they win, let's just say they only win 9 games. They win 9 games this year. Let's say they don't win the rest of the year. Say they go up to 11 games and the defense just looks even more, even better than what they were the year prior. I mean, Vance Joseph's done a hell of a job, and he's like you just mentioned, he's very well respected. People like him. He's players like to play for him. I mean, I haven't heard a bad thing about Vance Joseph. So I mean, I'm not saying this cycle, but maybe a year from now, depending on how things play out, Vance Joseph could be on someone's radar. Maybe the Cowboys. Just kidding.
Looking elsewhere around the league, the Chargers, who have been really great this year, they got absolutely slaughtered by the Buccaneers, who we talked a little bit about before. I said they're I still stand by it. They're probably not one of the best teams out there, but they looked really good this week against a very good Chargers team. And then there was the Bills going toe-to-toe with the Lions. The Lions lost like just about every single defensive player they had in that game to an injury. They lost 48-42 to the Bills. Heck of a game.
Jamal Adams was playing linebacker for them.
What's that?
Jamal Adams was playing linebacker at one point, I think, for the Lions. If I'm not mistaken. He's doing like Marquise Bell for them. You know what I mean? Like undersized.
No, I mean it's and there's been the Lions had a few long-term injuries to key players, and that's going to really affect their ability to, continue to push. Because the thing is, I mean, they're I think they're at 12 wins now, and they haven't even locked up the division because the Minnesota Vikings are now, I think, one game behind them, and they play each other in Week 18, which that's going to be a great game. And speaking of the Vikings and Brian Flores in that defense, now they go up against the Seahawks and potentially Sam Howell with Geno Smith getting hurt in this last game in a loss to the Packers. That's
tasty.
You talk about like thoughts and prayers to Sam Howell. That would be Brian Flores doesn't even have to try at that point. That's one where you talked about like Mike Zimmer telling Micah Parsons, like, just go do whatever. That's a game where Brian Flores tells his defense as a whole, like, okay, you guys just do whatever. Like, you got this. You know what to do here.
Nothing exotic here.
Yeah, just do what feels right, and you'll probably be right. And of course, the biggest story probably being the Chiefs, who they won again because they don't lose. But Patrick Mahomes went down. He didn't finish the game. He has an ankle injury.
Yeah.
Does that waver any confidence for you in the Kansas City Chiefs?
I mean, by all reports, it seems like he's going to play. So I mean, as long as he's going to play, if Mahomes is playing, I'm not worried about a thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we've seen this before with Mahomes. Like, he has these injuries. It feels like, the whole joke about like the NFL is scripted kind of thing. Like every year they put this in the script. Oh, Mahomes went down. Like, what's going to happen? And then he's back the next week. Looks like nothing even happened, and he's still completely unbeatable.
Well, hey, here's the thing. I know you can be critical of Josh Allen because of the turnovers and whatnot. Josh Allen's playing some damn good football right now. He's playing at MVP level.
He is the front runner for MVP in my mind. And by the way, it's out there on Twitter, and I'll go pull it up as well to brag. I predicted him to win MVP this year before the season started, and I specifically said I've ragged on him before, but with how they like kind of dismantled this offense a little bit, he lost some good receivers. I think he's going to show up in a big way, and he's done exactly that. I mean, we'll see how the last few weeks finish out, but as of right now, I don't think there's anybody else who has a claim to MVP other than Josh Allen. He's been playing amazing.
Well, let's be honest. I think they're going to win the rest of the regular season. I just think they're going to clean up. I mean, Josh Allen's playing at a level that, I mean, you don't see it. You don't see this often. Like he's, just the way he runs and passes the ball, it's phenomenal. He's perfect for Buffalo weather because as someone who lives, not that far down the road, you're literally going to get bad weather sometimes, especially this time of year. You don't need to throw the ball. Josh can just run. And like Josh does it all, man. Like he's at a different level. They're a better team without brother Diggs there. Trayvon's big brother there, Stephon Diggs. I mean, because he's spreading the ball out. Like he doesn't feel like he has to throw it to 14 all the time. Like he's throwing it to Coleman, your boy Kincaid, Knox is doing some things. Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel is even having a game. Like it's, obviously Cook's been good. They got Ray Davis, Ty Johnson. They got so many different parts there with the Buffalo Bills, where I think they're like the subtraction of a superstar receiver, like a Stephon Diggs, actually made them better because Josh just goes wherever the ball needs to go. It's not like he's forcing it to Diggs, and he's also I think he sees the field better. I think he's picking the right spots right now to run the ball as well. So so Joe Brady's calling a pretty damn good game as well. Joe Brady's another guy that he could be getting a coaching call soon too.
He'll be having some interviews for sure too. And another guy that will be having some interviews is the Buccaneers offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, who the Cowboys get to face next. And Liam Cohen is his first year as an offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers. And he came in, Baker Mayfield had rejuvenated his career with Dave Canales, who's now the head coach in Carolina. They just faced, starting to revive Bryce Young's career a little bit. But Baker's kept it going with Liam Cohen. The Buccaneers, as we mentioned, they just blew out the Chargers, and they're looking pretty good. Do you feel any confidence going into this game against the Buccaneers? Because the Cowboys have looked good, and we've seen they've been able to play well. They beat the Commanders, who have a winning record. They whooped up on the Panthers, but also the Buccaneers are playing a little bit better football lately.
Honestly, it's going to be a close game. I mean, I'm glad they're doing this on Sunday Night Football, because I do think it's going to be one of those close games. And for me, it comes down to Baker Mayfield. Which Baker are you getting? Because there are some games every once in a while that Baker just lays an egg, and this could be one of those games where Micah just gets in his face all game, and Mike Evans is held in check pretty well, even with the banged up secondary. That can happen. But if Baker and Mike Evans are playing the way they just played this past week, it's going to be tough sledding for the Cowboys. So it's really going to come down to me how well Baker plays. If Baker Mayfield brings his, I would even say if it's his B game, I think they beat the Cowboys. But if they slip up just a little bit and Mike Zimmer throws the knuckleball in there, so to speak, and really gets Baker all tied up, which can happen because Baker does lay eggs once in a while. That's kind of what he's done. It's kind of how he's been. That's why they're just a slightly above 500 team, because to me he's a slightly above 500 type of quarterback, where he's I would say in a way he's a better version of Jameis Winston, like where he keeps both teams in the game, but he still wins more games than he loses. Is the point. And the players love playing for him. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a tough game. I do think the Buccaneers are going to win, but I do think it's going to be close. To me, I think we're just so depleted all over the place, offensive, defensive. If we had, even a good portion of our deck back, I maybe might flip the tide a little bit. But the Buccaneers are on a different level. Rachaad White's playing good ball. Bucky Irving's been playing well this year. I think, Mike Evans, future Hall of Famer, and Baker's been playing really well. It's going to be real tough, and I do think the Buccaneers are going to win, but I think it'll still be a close game.
Well, I agree on a lot of the things you said. Rachaad White, of course, Arizona State player, having a heck of a year. Can't go wrong. Even Bucky Irving, who at Oregon played for offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, now the head coach at Arizona State. I mean, what can you say? Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, Cam Scatterbo, we just know how to make them at Arizona State. I have a higher opinion of Baker Mayfield than you. I think he's way better than Jameis Winston. I think he's better than a quarterback.
Let me stop you there real quick. I think he's way better than Jameis Winston, because here's the thing. My comparison wasn't that
all due respect
he's on
to
the
Jameis
same
Winston,
level.
by the way.
What's that?
All due respect to Jameis Winston, by the way.
Yeah, no, I don't hate on Jameis Winston, but Jameis Winston's one of those guys where he keeps both teams in the game, but he loses more games. Baker, in a lot of ways, is like that, where he keeps both teams in the games, because like that he's a gunslinger, and I love that about Baker Mayfield. Mm-hmm. I'm actually I'm a big believer in Baker. When the Browns took him number one, when everybody was like, oh, they shouldn't do that, I was pounding the table because I love Baker Mayfield. I just think for me, he's one of those guys where he keeps everybody in the game, which for me as a football fan makes it really interesting. And, someone who covers the NFL at large here, like it makes it interesting. But but at times Baker can do some things where you're like, all right, I think the Cowboys got a shot here. If Micah can get in the backfield a little bit just to throw him off, just a touch, Baker makes mistakes. He's done it. That's why he's bounced around the league as much as he has.
And you're right. He does a couple times. He does lay an egg. Other times he gets in the kitchen and bakes, and he takes that egg that he just laid and he makes something with it.
Yeah, yeah. He turns.
That was my lame attempt at turning your thing into a food metaphor with the time to bake, whatever.
I'll keep it sort of kid friendly. I'll keep it sort of kid friendly here. I'll try to not swear as much here. But he makes chicken salad out of chicken. What do the kids say nowadays? Ish, so to speak. So I didn't want to say the bad word. I'm trying to be friendly. So he turns bad things into good things, a lot of times. So
Yeah.
Baker's a winner. Love Baker. I think he does enough in a close game against the boys this week.
And I think if there is a defensive coordinator out there who can bring out the bad Baker, it is Mike Zimmer.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it kind of worries me because that defense also kind of like encourages gunslingers to like sling the gun a little bit. And when you got a guy like Mike Evans out there, it's a lot of Mikes we're talking about in this matchup. But you got Mike Evans out there, and Baker's just like, screw it. Mike Evans is down there somewhere. That can be bad for you too, especially with Trayvon Diggs not being able to play in this one either. So I agree. I think it's going to be close. As of right now, I'm actually leaning towards a Cowboys win. Okay. But I do reserve the right to change my mind on that later in the week as we see where the injury report's going, see where the vibes are going. Because, if Baker is talking in press conferences and he's like feeling himself and he's like, oh, I feel confident, I think like that's the time he lays an egg. Like once Baker starts believing in himself, once the media starts believing in Baker, things kind of start to fall apart. He does best when everyone doubts him. And he's just like, I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to show you how wrong you are. So I think right now, Mike McCarthy and Mike Zimmer need to get out to that press conference and be like, I think Baker Mayfield should be the MVP frontrunner. He's doing incredible things. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. The classic Bill Belichick, like love up your opponent right before you crush their soul. Yes. I think they got to be doing that. And then he's going to start getting a little bit of an ego. He's going to be like, I got this. And then Micah Parsons just, does his thing. Yeah. But I won't officially make my mind up until I see how Baker's vibes are in the week.
Speaking of Micah Parsons, I got to get a Syracuse thing in here, of course, naturally speaking. So Micah Parsons is 1.5 sacks away on the season to starting his career in 4 seasons with double-digit sacks. There's a great list of players like Derek Thomas on there, for example, that one of a handful of players that have done it. But there is one that I have to mention. He just got inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame this past year, and that's the legend out of Syracuse University, Dwight Freeney. He could join this club with a Syracuse great like Dwight Freeney. So, I think Micah gets it. There's a few games left, 1.5. He's probably going to get it this week against Baker. Let's be honest.
Well, thank you for getting that Syracuse reference in there. I know we were all dying to end on that note.
Of course. It's part of my shtick. I got to do it.
Yeah, of course. And again, like we started off the show talking about, we've got the holidays coming up. We will be back next week, I believe. Right now, the plan is we'll be coming to you Christmas Eve morning, talking about what we want in our stockings from Santa Claus for the Cowboys. What is on our Cowboys Christmas wish list? Yeah. And we'll be, of course, breaking down either a win or a loss to the Buccaneers, discussing all things Baker Mayfield, Micah Parsons, Syracuse football. We'll get in there at some point. So enjoy the rest of your week. Be sure to come check us out next week when we're breaking down our Christmas wish lists. And as always, remember, how about them Cowboys?